I never expected loneliness to look like confidence. At the animal shelter where we both volunteered, Blake seemed completely self-sufficient. He handled the rowdiest dogs with ease, smiled at everyone, never asked for help. But one evening after closing, standing in the empty puppy room, he finally said the words that changed everything between us. Like and subscribe for more true stories about finding connection in unexpected places. Your support means everything. The first time I saw Blake was on a Tuesday morning in late September. I was carrying a bag of donated blankets through the back door of the Tacoma Humane Society when I nearly collided with someone coming out of the laundry room. He stepped back quickly. His hands were full of clean towels. He had dark brown hair that fell just past his ears and gray eyes that looked tired but kind. "Sorry," I said. "Didn't see you there? No problem." He smiled briefly and moved past me down the hallway. I stood there holding the blankets and watched him disappear around the corner. Something about the way he moved caught my attention, calm and deliberate, like he was used to being careful. I had started volunteering at the shelter about 3 months earlier. "My name is Jordan Finley and I work as a water resources specialist for the city. My job involves a lot of spreadsheets and meetings about stormwater permits. I needed something different in my life. Something that didn't involve sitting at a computer all day." The shelter felt like the right choice. I'd always loved dogs. Growing up in Olympia, my family had 2 golden retrievers. When I moved to Tacoma for work 5 years ago, I rented a small apartment in the hilltop neighborhood that didn't allow pets. Volunteering seemed like a way to get my fix. I saw Blake again later that same morning. He was in one of the outdoor play yards with a German Shepherd mix named Ranger. The dog was notorious for being reactive around other animals. Most volunteers avoided him. Blake was throwing a tennis ball across the yard. Ranger sprinted after it and brought it back. Blake crouched down and spoke to the dog quietly. I couldn't hear what he was saying, but Ranger sat and waited patiently for the next throw. I was cleaning kennels in the adjacent building, but I kept glancing out the window. Blake had this easy confidence with the animals, no tension in his body language, just presence. After my shift ended, I went to sign out at the front desk. The volunteer coordinator, a woman named Trish in her 60s, was sorting through paperwork. "Hey Trish," I said, "who's the guy working with Ranger today?" She looked up and smiled. Blake Harwell, he just started a couple weeks ago, super reliable, always takes the tough ones." "What does he do for work, I mean?" Trish shrugged. "I think he's an electrician or maybe HVAC. Something in the trades, why?" "Just curious," I said. "He seems good with the dogs." She gave me a knowing look but didn't say anything. I signed my name on the timesheet and left. Over the next few weeks, I started paying more attention to when Blake volunteered. He came in 3 times a week. Tuesday and Thursday mornings, Saturday afternoons. I adjusted my schedule to match his without really admitting to myself why. We didn't talk much at first, just polite nods in the hallway, brief exchanges about which dogs needed walking. But I learned things about him by watching. He always arrived exactly on time. He brought his own work gloves. He never checked his phone while he was with the animals. When he cleaned kennels, he was thorough and methodical. When he walked dogs, he let them set the pace. One Thursday in early October, I was in the small dog room organizing supplies. Blake came in with a clipboard. "Hey," he said, "do you know if we have any more of the puppy pads, the lavender-scented ones?" I looked up from the box I was unpacking. "I think there's a case in the storage closet. Want me to grab it?" "I can get it," he said. "Just wasn't sure where they were kept." "It's kind of buried," I said. "I'll show you." We walked together down the narrow hallway to the storage room. I opened the door and flipped on the light. The space was crammed with shelves stacked high with food bags, cleaning supplies, medical equipment. I stepped inside and pointed to the far corner. "Should be back there." "Behind the cat litter." Blake followed me in. The room smelled like kibble and disinfectant. We maneuvered around a stack of crates and I found the case of puppy pads on the bottom shelf. "Got it," I said. I lifted the box and turned around. Blake was standing closer than I expected. We were in a tight space, our shoulders almost touched. "Thanks," he said quietly. No problem. For a moment, neither of us moved. I could see the faint lines at the corners of his eyes. The way his shirt collar was slightly crooked, then he stepped back and I handed him the box. Appreciate it, he said. Anytime. We walked back down the hallway in silence. My heart was beating a little faster. I told myself it didn't mean anything. But I started looking for excuses to work near him. If he was in the laundry room, I'd bring in dirty towels. If he was cleaning the cat area, I'd offer to help. He was always polite but never particularly warm, just friendly enough to be professional. I couldn't tell if he was naturally reserved or if he wasn't interested. Maybe both. One Saturday afternoon in late October, I was sitting in the volunteer break room filling out adoption paperwork. Blake came in and went straight to the coffee maker. He looked more tired than usual. Long day? I asked. He glanced over. Yeah, had a job run late this morning, commercial install. You're an electrician, HVAC technician, he said. Mostly residential, but some commercial work too. That's cool, I said. I'm with the city water resources. He poured coffee into a paper cup. What does that involve? Basically making sure stormwater doesn't flood neighborhoods or pollute the bay, I said. A lot of infrastructure planning, site inspections. Boring stuff? Doesn't sound boring, he said. Sounds important, I smiled. Thanks. He leaned against the counter and took a sip of his coffee. For the first time since I'd met him, he didn't seem in a hurry to leave. I decided to take a chance. Do you live around here? I asked. Proctor District, he said. Rent a duplex on Adams Street. I'm in Hilltop, I said. Been there about 5 years, he nodded. I moved to Tacoma 2 years ago. From Spokane? Big change. Yeah, he looked down into his coffee. Needed something different. There was something in his voice that made me want to ask more. But before I could, he set down his cup and straightened. Better get back to it, he said. Have a good one. You too. He left the room and I sat there staring at the paperwork in front of me. I felt like I'd just gotten a glimpse of something underneath the surface, something he kept carefully hidden. November came and the weather turned cold and rainy. The shelter was busier than usual. A lot of strays brought in from the streets, a lot of owner surrenders because of housing situations. I started staying later on my volunteer days. Blake did too. We'd often be the last ones there besides the evening staff. One Tuesday night, I was mopping the floor in the main hallway when I heard barking coming from the isolation room. It was a sharp, frantic sound. I put down the mop and went to investigate. Blake was already there. He was kneeling beside a kennel that held a young pit bull mix. The dog was cowering in the back corner, shaking and barking. What happened? I asked. Blake didn't look up. Not sure. I came in to check on her and she was like this. I think something scared her. The dog's name was Bella. She'd been brought in a week earlier after being found chained in a yard with no food or water. She was underweight and skittish. She didn't trust people. Blake was speaking to her in a low, steady voice. It's okay, girl, you're safe. Nobody's going to hurt you. I crouched down beside him. Can I help? Just stay calm, he said. Let her come to us. We sat there together on the floor. Blake kept talking quietly. After a few minutes, Bella stopped barking. She watched us with wide, anxious eyes. Blake reached into his pocket and pulled out a small piece of jerky. He set it on the floor near the kennel door, then he sat back. Bella sniffed the air. Slowly, she crept forward. She took the jerky and retreated to the corner again. Blake set down another piece, this time closer to us. Bella hesitated, then she came forward and took it. She stayed near the door. Blake reached out slowly and let her sniff his hand. She flinched but didn't move away. He kept his hand still. After a moment, she licked his fingers. Good girl, he whispered. That's it. I watched him and felt something shift in my chest, the patience in his movements, the gentleness. It wasn't just skill, it was empathy. Bella let him touch her head. She leaned into his hand just slightly. Blake looked over at me and smiled. A real smile, the first one I'd seen from him. She's going to be okay, he said. Thanks to you, he shook his head. She just needed to know she could trust someone. We stayed with Bella until she settled down. Then we finished closing up the shelter together. When we walked out to the parking lot, it was raining lightly. Blake pulled his jacket hood up. See you Thursday? Yeah, I said. See you then. I drove home through the wet streets thinking about the way he'd looked at that dog, like he understood what it felt like to be afraid. The weeks passed. Thanksgiving came and went. The shelter decorated for the holidays. I kept volunteering alongside Blake. We talked more now, small conversations about work and weather and the animals, but nothing too personal. I wanted to ask him out. I'd known I was gay since college. I'd had a few relationships, nothing serious, nothing that lasted. But I was comfortable with who I was. I wasn't sure about Blake. He never mentioned dating anyone, never talked about his personal life. I didn't want to make things awkward if I'd misread the situation. Then one evening in mid-December, everything changed. It was a Thursday night. The shelter was closing early because of a staff holiday party. Blake and I were the only volunteers left. We were cleaning the puppy room together. There were 5 puppies in the room, a litter of lab mixes that had been surrendered the week before. They were 8 weeks old and full of energy. They kept escaping from their pen and running around our feet. Blake was trying to put fresh bedding in the pen while I chased down puppies. It was chaotic and ridiculous. At one point, I slipped on a wet spot on the floor and nearly fell. Blake caught my arm. "You okay?" he asked. "Yeah," I said, laughing. "These guys are out of control." We finally got all 5 puppies back in the pen. Blake latched the gate and we both stood there catching our breath. The puppies piled on top of each other and fell asleep almost instantly. "Well," I said, "that was an adventure." Blake smiled. He leaned against the wall and looked around the now quiet room. "I'm going to miss this." I felt a jolt of alarm. "Miss it? Are you leaving?" "No," he said quickly. "I just mean the chaos, the noise. When I go home, it's so quiet." He said it casually, but there was something underneath the words, something lonely. "You live alone?" I asked. "Yeah," he crossed his arms. "It's fine. I'm used to it." "Do you have family in the area?" "No, my parents are still in Spokane. I don't see them much." I hesitated. Then I said, "What made you move to Tacoma?" He was quiet for a moment. He looked down at the puppies. "I needed a fresh start. Things weren't great in Spokane. I was in a relationship that ended badly. I wasn't happy with my job. I felt stuck." It was the most personal thing he'd ever told me. I didn't want to push, but I also didn't want him to stop talking. "That must have been hard," I said. "It was," he said, "but it was the right decision. I like Tacoma. I like my work. I like volunteering here." "Do you ever feel lonely?" I asked. He looked at me. His expression was unguarded in a way I'd never seen before. "Yeah, I do." My heart was pounding. "Me too sometimes." We stood there in the quiet puppy room. The overhead lights hummed softly. One of the puppies made a small snoring sound. Blake said, "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "Do you ever get the feeling that everyone else has figured out how to connect with people and you just haven't?" His voice was so quiet I almost didn't hear him. I felt a wave of recognition so strong it made my throat tight. "All the time," I said. He nodded slowly. "I thought maybe it was just me." "It's not." We looked at each other. I wanted to say more, but I didn't know how. I wanted to tell him that I understood, that I felt the same way, that maybe we didn't have to be lonely. But before I could find the words, Blake straightened and cleared his throat. "Anyway, sorry, that got heavy." "Don't apologize," I said. "We should probably finish up," he said. "I'm sure you have somewhere to be." I didn't. I had nowhere to be, but I could see him pulling back, putting up the walls again. "Yeah," I said. "Let's finish up." We cleaned the rest of the room in silence. When we were done, we walked out to the parking lot together. It was cold and dark. Our breath made clouds in the air. Blake unlocked his truck. "See you next week." "Actually," I said, "do you want to grab coffee sometime outside of the shelter?" He paused with his hand on the door. He looked at me and I couldn't read his expression. "Like as friends?" he asked. "However you want," I said. My voice was steady but my hands were shaking. He was quiet. Then he said, "I'd like that." Relief flooded through me. Yeah, he smiled, a small tentative smile. "I'd really like that." We met for coffee the following Saturday at a place called Anthem on 6th Avenue. It was a small shop with mismatched furniture and local art on the walls. I got there first and ordered a drip coffee, then I sat by the window and watched the street. Blake arrived exactly on time. He was wearing jeans and a dark green flannel shirt. His hair was still damp like he'd just showered. "Hey," he said. "Hey, what do you want? I'll grab it. Just black coffee, thanks." I went to the counter and ordered. When I came back, Blake was sitting across from me looking out the window. He seemed nervous. "Thanks for meeting me," I said as I set down his coffee. "Thanks for asking," he said. We sat there for a moment in awkward silence. Then we both started talking at the same time. "So how long have you?" I wanted to. We stopped and laughed. "You go," I said. Blake wrapped his hands around his coffee cup. "I wanted to say I appreciate you being patient with me. I know I'm not the easiest person to get to know." "You don't have to explain," I said. "I want to though." He took a breath. "The truth is I haven't had many close friendships or relationships. I'm not good at opening up. It's something I've been trying to work on." "What makes it hard?" I asked gently. He thought about it. "I think I learned early on to just keep things to myself. My parents weren't bad people, but they weren't very emotionally available. I was an only child. I got used to being alone." I nodded. "That makes sense. When I was in Spokane, I was with someone for 3 years," he said. "His name was Trevor. We lived together. I thought we were happy. But he told me one day that I was too closed off, that he felt like he didn't really know me. That must have hurt." "It did, because part of me knew he was right." Blake looked down at his coffee. "He ended up leaving. He met someone else, someone more open, I guess." "I'm sorry." "It's okay. It was 2 years ago. I'm over it, but it made me realize I need to change. I can't keep living like this." I felt a surge of affection for him, for his honesty, for the effort he was making. "For what it's worth," I said, "I think you're doing great. You opened up to me the other night. That took courage." He met my eyes. "You made it easy." We talked for over an hour about our jobs and our families and the things we like to do. Blake told me he'd grown up hiking in the mountains around Spokane. He missed the wilderness. Tacoma felt too urban sometimes. I told him about growing up in Olympia, about studying environmental science at Western Washington University, about moving to Tacoma and feeling like I still hadn't quite found my place. "Do you like the city?" he asked. "I do," I said. "But I know what you mean about missing nature. I don't get out as much as I used to." "We should go sometime," Blake said, then he paused. "If you want, I'd love that." We left the coffee shop and walked down 6th Avenue together. The December air was crisp and cold. The streets were decorated with holiday lights. "Do you have plans for Christmas?" I asked. "Not really," Blake said. "I'll probably just stay home. My parents invited me to Spokane, but I don't think I'm going to make the drive." "You should come to my place," I said. "I'm cooking dinner, nothing fancy, but you're welcome." He looked surprised. "Are you sure?" "Absolutely. I hate the idea of you being alone on Christmas." He smiled. "Okay, thank you. I'd really like that." We said goodbye at the corner and went our separate ways. I walked back to my car feeling lighter than I had in months. Christmas came and Blake showed up at my apartment on Hilltop right on time. He brought a bottle of wine and a bag of fancy coffee beans. "You didn't have to bring anything," I said as I let him in. "I wanted to," he said. He looked around the small living room. "Nice place. It's tiny, but it works." I'd made roast chicken and vegetables and mashed potatoes. We ate at my little kitchen table and talked about everything and nothing. Blake seemed more relaxed than I'd ever seen him. He laughed easily. He asked questions. He told stories about disastrous HVAC jobs. After dinner, we sat on the couch and watched an old movie. Blake sat close enough that our shoulders touched. I was intensely aware of every movement he made. Halfway through the movie he said, "Can I tell you something?" "Of course. I'm really glad I met you." I looked at him. His face was serious. "I'm glad I met you too. I don't usually connect with people like this," he said. "It scares me a little." "It scares me too," I admitted. Yeah. "But I think it's worth it." He reached over and took my hand. His palm was warm and slightly rough. I laced my fingers through his. We sat there holding hands and watching the rest of the movie. When it ended, Blake said he should probably head home. I walked him to the door. "Thank you for today," he said. "It was perfect." "Anytime," he hesitated. Then he leaned in and kissed me. It was soft and tentative, a question more than a statement. I kissed him back. My hand came up to his face. His stubble was rough under my fingers. When we pulled apart, he was smiling. "I've wanted to do that for a while." "Me too." He left, and I closed the door and stood there grinning like an idiot. We started spending more time together after that. We went hiking at Point Defiance. We got dinner at little restaurants in Proctor. We kept volunteering at the shelter on the same schedule. Blake slowly let me further into his life. He told me about his childhood, about feeling different and not understanding why until high school, about coming out to his parents when he was 20 and having them react with polite discomfort, about moving away and building a life on his own terms. I told him about my own coming out, about my parents who were supportive but confused, about my college boyfriend who broke my heart, about the loneliness of living in a new city where I didn't know anyone. We talked about our fears, about getting hurt, about not being enough, about wanting connection but being terrified of vulnerability. One night in late January, we were at Blake's duplex. We were sitting on his couch eating takeout and watching the rain outside. "I need to tell you something," Blake said. I looked over at him. His expression was nervous. "Okay," I said. "I really care about you," he said, "more than I've cared about anyone in a long time." "And that's terrifying." "Why is it terrifying?" "Because what if I mess it up?" His voice was tight. "What if I'm too closed off or too difficult or too broken?" I set down my food and turned to face him. "Blake, you're not broken." "I feel broken sometimes." "We all do," I said, "but you're not. You're just learning." "We both are." He looked at me. His eyes were bright with unshed tears. "I don't want to lose you." "You won't," I said. "I'm not going anywhere." "How do you know?" "Because I care about you too, and I'm willing to work through the hard stuff if you are." He nodded. "I am." I pulled him into a hug. He held on tight. I could feel him shaking slightly. "It's okay," I whispered. "We're okay." February came. We fell into a rhythm. Blake stayed over at my place a few nights a week. We cooked together, we watched movies, we talked late into the night about everything. The shelter work continued. We took on more responsibilities. Blake started helping with the training program for reactive dogs. I joined the adoption event team. One Saturday in early March, we were at an adoption event at a pet store in Puyallup. We'd brought 5 dogs from the shelter. By the end of the day, 4 of them had found homes. Blake and I were loading the last dog back into the transport van when Trish came over. "You two are a great team," she said. "Have you ever thought about fostering?" Blake and I looked at each other. "I can't," I said. "My apartment doesn't allow pets." "I've thought about it," Blake said, "but I wasn't sure I could handle it alone." "You wouldn't be alone," Trish said. She looked between us with a knowing smile. "You could do it together." The idea took root. Blake's duplex allowed pets. We talked about it over the next few days. Finally, we decided to try. Our first foster was a senior Beagle named Otis. He'd been surrendered because his owner went into assisted living. He was overweight and had arthritis, and he snored like a freight train. Blake and I picked him up from the shelter on a Wednesday evening. We drove him to Blake's place and set up a bed in the living room. Otis immediately made himself at home. He climbed onto the couch and fell asleep. "Well," Blake said, "that was easy." We sat on either side of Otis. Blake scratched behind the dog's ears. I rubbed his belly. Otis snored contentedly. "This feels right," I said. Blake looked over at me. "Yeah, it does." Having Otis changed things, I started spending almost every night at Blake's place. We developed routines, morning walks, evening fetch sessions in the backyard, weekends at the dog park. Otis eventually got adopted by a retired couple in University Place. We were sad to see him go, but happy he'd found a good home. We fostered 3 more dogs over the next few months. Each one brought its own challenges and rewards. Each one brought Blake and I closer together. One evening in late May, we were sitting on Blake's back porch. We just dropped off our latest foster at her new home. The yard felt empty without a dog running around. "Do you ever think about getting our own dog?" Blake asked. "All the time," I said. "I mean really our own," he said, "not a foster." I looked at him. "Are you asking what I think you're asking?" He smiled. I'm asking if you want to adopt a dog with me and also if you want to move in here, officially." My heart started racing. Seriously, I know it's only been 6 months, but it feels right. You're here all the time anyway, and I don't want to do this without you." I leaned over and kissed him. Yes. To all of it, I moved into Blake's duplex in June. It was a small place, but it felt like home. We painted the bedroom. We bought a new couch. We hung pictures on the walls. We adopted a dog from the shelter in July. Her name was Rosie. She was a 3-year-old pit bull mix with a white patch over one eye. She'd been at the shelter for 8 months. Nobody wanted her because she was high energy and didn't get along with other dogs. Blake and I took her home and fell completely in love. Rosie was a handful. She needed a lot of exercise and training, but she was also sweet and goofy and incredibly loyal. She slept between us every night. She followed us around the house. She made us laugh constantly. Life settled into a good rhythm. I kept working for the city. Blake continued his HVAC business. We both kept volunteering at the shelter once a week. We had our challenges. Blake still struggled sometimes with opening up. There were days when he withdrew into himself and I had to be patient. There were days when I pushed too hard and he pushed back. But we talked about it. We didn't let things fester. We were learning how to be in a relationship, how to be vulnerable, how to trust. One Saturday in September, we took Rosie to Point Defiance for a hike. It was a beautiful day, warm sun, clear sky, the kind of day that makes you grateful to be alive. We walked through the forest trails and down to the beach. Rosie ran in and out of the water chasing sticks. Blake and I sat on a log and watched her. "I've been thinking," Blake said. "About what?" "About how different my life is now compared to a year ago. Good different or bad different?" "Good," he said. "Really good. A year ago I was lonely. I went to work and came home and didn't talk to anyone. I thought that was just how things were going to be. And now," he looked at me, "now I have you and Rosie. And a life that feels full." I reached over and took his hand. "I feel the same way. I wanted to say thank you," he said, "for being patient with me. For not giving up." "You don't have to thank me," I said. "I love you." It was the first time I'd said it out loud. Blake's eyes widened slightly. Then he smiled. "I love you too," he said. We kissed while Rosie barked at a seagull in the distance. Fall came and the weather turned cool and rainy again. Blake and I spent our evenings curled up on the couch with Rosie. We cooked elaborate meals. We watched too much TV. We talked about the future. In October, Blake asked if I wanted to go to Spokane with him for Thanksgiving. He wanted me to meet his parents. I was nervous, but I said yes. We drove to Spokane the day before Thanksgiving. It was a long drive through the mountains. Blake was quiet for most of it. I could tell he was anxious. His parents lived in a small ranch house on the south side of the city. His mom answered the door. She was a thin woman with graying hair and a cautious smile. "Blake," she said. She hugged him briefly, then she looked at me. "You must be Jordan." "Nice to meet you," I said. His dad was in the living room watching football. He stood and shook my hand. He had the same gray eyes as Blake. The visit was polite but strained. Blake's parents were cordial but distant. They asked me surface-level questions about my job and my family. They didn't ask anything about our relationship. At dinner, Blake's mom made a comment about hoping Blake would move back to Spokane someday. Blake said he was happy in Tacoma. She didn't respond. That night, Blake and I stayed in his old bedroom. It was exactly as he'd left it when he moved out at 18. Posters on the walls, trophies on the shelf, a twin bed that we both barely fit in. Blake lay on his back staring at the ceiling. "You okay?" I asked. "Yeah, sorry, they're not great with this stuff. It's okay." "It's not though," he said. "I want them to know you." "Really know you?" "I want them to see how happy I am." "Maybe they do see it," I said. "Maybe they just don't know how to express it." He turned his head to look at me. "When did you get so wise?" "I have my moments." We left Spokane the next day. On the drive back, Blake seemed lighter. He held my hand across the console. He talked about plans for the duplex. About trips we could take, about the life we were building together. Winter came. We celebrated Christmas together again, this time at Blake's place with Rosie sprawled under the tree. In January, I got a promotion at work. I was asked to lead a new stormwater infrastructure project. It was a big responsibility, but I was excited about it. Blake's HVAC business was doing well too. He hired an apprentice. He was talking about expanding. One evening in February, we were walking Rosie through the Proctor district. The streets were wet from rain. The air smelled like evergreen trees. Blake said, "I've been thinking about something." "What's that?" "I want to buy a house, a real house, not a rental." I looked over at him. "That's a big step, I know, but I'm ready, and I want to do it with you if you want. You want to buy a house together?" "Yeah," he said. "I mean, we don't have to rush. But I want to start looking, start planning." I felt a rush of emotion. A year and a half ago, I'd been alone in my tiny apartment wondering if I'd ever find someone. Now I was walking through the rain with the person I loved talking about buying a house. "I want that too," I said. We started looking at houses in March. We went to open houses on the weekends. We talked about neighborhoods and budgets and what we needed in a space. In April, we found a small Craftsman bungalow in the North End. It had 2 bedrooms and a big backyard for Rosie. It needed work, but it had good bones. We made an offer. It was accepted. The closing process was stressful. There were inspections and paperwork and unexpected expenses. But we got through it together. We moved into the house in June, almost exactly 2 years after I'd first seen Blake at the animal shelter. Our first night in the house, we ordered pizza and sat on the floor of the empty living room. Rosie ran from room to room exploring. Blake opened a bottle of wine. "To new beginnings," he said. "To us," I said. We clinked our paper cups together and drank. Later that night, we were lying in our new bedroom. The windows were open and we could hear the sound of wind in the trees. Blake said, "Do you remember that night at the shelter when I told you I was lonely?" "Of course. I didn't think anything would come of it," he said. "I thought I was just confessing to someone who would forget about it the next day. But I didn't forget." "No, you didn't." He turned to face me. "You saw me, really saw me. And you didn't run away." "Why would I run away?" "I don't know. People usually do." I reached out and touched his face. "I'm not going anywhere." "I know," he said. "I believe that now." We fell asleep holding each other. Rosie snored at the foot of the bed. The next few months were busy. We unpacked boxes. We painted walls. We planted a garden in the backyard. We hosted a housewarming party and invited friends from the shelter. Trish came and brought a gift basket. She hugged both of us and told us she'd known from the beginning that we were meant for each other. Blake's parents came to visit in August. It was the first time they'd come to see him in Tacoma. They stayed for the weekend. His mom walked through the house and looked at everything we'd done. She paused in the living room where we had pictures hung on the wall, pictures of us at the shelter. Pictures of Rosie, pictures from our hikes. "You've built a beautiful life here," she said quietly. Blake looked at her in surprise. "Thanks, Mom. I'm proud of you," she said. Then she looked at me. "Both of you." It wasn't a dramatic moment, but it mattered. Fall came again. The air turned cool. The leaves changed color. Blake and I settled into our life together. We still volunteered at the shelter every week. We still fostered dogs occasionally. We still took Rosie on long walks through the neighborhood. One evening in late October, we were sitting on our back porch watching the sunset. Rosie was lying at our feet. The sky was streaked with pink and orange. "Do you ever think about that first day we met?" I asked. Blake smiled. "All the time." "What do you remember most?" "I remember thinking you seemed kind," he said. "And I remember being scared to talk to you." "Why were you scared?" "Because I knew if I let you in, I'd have to face how lonely I'd been, and that felt dangerous. And now," he looked at me. "Now I'm grateful I took the risk." I leaned over and kissed him. "Me too." We sat there as the sun went down and the stars came out. Rosie shifted in her sleep. The wind rustled through the trees. I thought about how much had changed in 2 years, how 2 lonely people had found each other in a place full of abandoned animals, how we'd learned to trust, how we'd built something real. It wasn't a perfect story. We still had hard days, we still struggled sometimes, but we had each other, and that made all the difference. Blake reached over and took my hand. "I love you," he said. "I love you too." Rosie woke up and stretched. She looked at us expectantly. Blake laughed. "I think someone wants dinner," he said. We stood and went inside together. Into the house we'd made our home, into the life we'd built from loneliness and hope and the simple act of showing up. The shelter had given us more than just volunteer work. It had given us a place to be vulnerable, a place to connect, a place to start, and that beginning had turned into everything.